Our next subject is going to be Black mental health. Um, During this pandemic, we just talked about COVID and how COVID has been affecting us as a community. But we have also heard many speak about how COVID is going to be or could be causing a mental health crisis in this country. So many people are isolated, disconnected, possible depression, substance abuse. But the one thing that isn't discussed is the fact that before we even had a pandemic, before we even had social distancing or staying at home, that mental health has not been a subject that has been widely discussed in our community as African American. So I wanted to introduce our two speakers that are going to be covering this section. We have Joi Madison. Welcome, Joi. Joi was raised in South Central Los Angeles and a citizen of the globe. Joi K. Madison, international coach and speaker, has facilitated workshops and supported clients spanning 4 continents. Workshops topics include trauma-informed emotional intelligence, communication, and boundaries for healthy relationships, healing your relationship with money through social, cultural understanding, and more. As a former personal trainer and fitness studio owner and now therapist coach, Joi's approach to wellness is holistic in nature, a practice that includes the mind, body, and spirit. Her focus is on supporting clients with becoming aware of the beliefs and stories they hold and identifying where there's an opportunity to shift perspectives, expand their resources, and heal. Joi comes with experience doing nonprofit consulting, corporate wellness. Let's see. Sorry. Corporate wellness. My screen blanked out on me. I apologize for that. Corporate wellness workshops, private coaching, and holds a professorship in marriage and family therapy department. The Chicago School of Professional Chicago School of Professional Psychology. As program manager for Sisters Mentally Mobilized at the California Black Women's Health Project, which is what illuminated us to her existence, Joi designs and oversees curriculum related to increasing awareness, decreasing stigma, and promoting advocacy around issues impacting and impeding the mental health of Black women across the state of California. In her effort to bridge the gaps between mental, physical, and relational health, Joi is currently working to complete her dissertation researching concerning efficacy of conjoint fitness exercise in enhancing intimacy and satisfaction in romantic partnerships. Our other half of our panel for this section is Gary Williams. He is from our very own SEIU-UHW family, part of our Healthcare Justice California division, and he's going to be speaking on his personal experience with mental health. I want to segue into hearing from you, Joi, about the work you do and also a little bit about what you heard in that story from that young man.
Yeah, I heard a lot of things, so much of which I've seen that video several times, and it hits me every single time. So, just about what I do, I work as a therapist and coach, as a marriage and family therapist. I work with couples and individuals. Most specifically, I work especially with the California Black Women's Health Project as a program manager for Sisters Mentally Mobilized, which is a statewide program. It's a sister circle model that is designed by Black women for Black women, specifically to fill in the gaps where we are lacking resources and support and treatment for the mental health challenges that we face. And we're looking specifically to make sure that we create culturally competent interventions, because we understand that a lot of what we are taught about mental health, how we understand it, how we approach it, has not been in consideration of us, right? We were not involved in the studies. We have not been considered in terms of culturally what matters to us and what works for us. And so oftentimes we are encouraged to seek treatment, but that treatment doesn't always reflect our best interests, which is what Brother Youssef was speaking about earlier, that sort of earned mistrust that the medical system has when it comes to Black people and our willingness to lean on and look to them for our wellness. And so also tapping into a little bit about what Brother Youssef was talking about when he spoke about the comorbidity issues that come up when we discuss COVID and how it disproportionately impacts Black and Brown people. One thing that's important for me to really highlight here when it comes to the comorbidity, this video specifically just spoke about trauma and how prominent it is in Black culture. And I think in Black people, whether it's historical trauma, whether it is, today we are talking about marks the 1 year since Ahmaud Arbery was gunned down, hunted, stalked, and murdered for going for a run, right? Um, I just heard earlier about 3 young Black boys who were killed at a gas station by a white man, just I guess because he felt like it. So, these are the kinds of things that we're hearing about constantly, right? And even if we're not necessarily primarily or directly related or involved, vicarious trauma is real, right? Hearing about these things and recognizing that it could have been us, could be us any day, that stuff is very real. And so when we live in this heightened state of fight or flight, which is often the case when we are exposed to these traumas, chronically living in a high stress environment, that decreases and depresses our immune system. That also depresses our capacity to metabolize glucose or to produce insulin. And all of these things have a lot to do with diabetes, right? And so, yes, it's important. You remember in my bio, we spoke about I take a holistic approach to health, right? And that prior to my work in mental health, I used to own a fitness studio and I worked as a personal trainer and I've been an athlete my entire life. And so it's very important for me to be physically active consistently and to eat well and to be mindful about how we are engaging in the behaviors that directly impact our health. But it's also important for us to remember that there are factors in our socio-cultural environment that impact us. We talk about living in food deserts, when we talk about living in high stress, chronic stress situations that influence our immune health and our capacity to fight off or deal with some of the things that show up as comorbid um, conditions, right, that make us more susceptible to things like a COVID. Like when we talk about Black mental health specifically, we have to talk about it in the context of what is going on in our social cultural environment. It cannot be something that we inherently look to ourselves as like an internal issue, right? Like I saw people in the comments talking about, struggling with depression and being told things like it's all in your head or you need to get over it. It is so important for us to understand, like when we talk about mental health, it is about our capacity to be well. And so oftentimes the symptoms and behaviors that we present with, and this is again going back to the video that this gentleman spoke about, the times that he blacked out and went off on people, was in response to the fact that he was holding on to so much hurt and pain and trauma and had nowhere else to go or nothing else to do with it, right? And so it presented itself as behaviors that ultimately landed him in jail, that were criminalized, when we're really talking about a health issue here, right? And that's not uncommon for us to not have outlets because we are shamed, there is stigma, we don't trust systems, so we don't seek or get the support that we need. And we find ourselves carrying these loads until they get so heavy that we explode. And sometimes we explode in a space, place, or time where it can be detrimental not only to our health, but then to our, we create legal and social impairments, right? And so we have to be able to think about, when I talk to my clients about mental health or mental illness, I don't ask the question, what's wrong, right? Because that implies that inherently something is wrong with you, meaning it is an internal issue that you come with. It's a part of who you are. And I don't believe that to be true. Oftentimes, the more appropriate question is what happened? Because that suggests that there is an environmental issue, there is an event or circumstance that triggered this symptom or behavior that you are responding to. That may be, when we look at the symptom or behavior in a vacuum, right? It can be pathological, right? We can make it like, oh, something's wrong with you. But when we zoom out and look at the context and the conditions in which you are expected to live, we understand that what you're doing is really about how you have adapted to your environment and your best attempt to survive in that. And when I understand that, when I begin to work with you, now I'm working with you in a context that is considerate of everything that's happening and not putting the blame or the responsibility on you to fix something that you didn't break. Right. And so it is so important when we're talking about Black mental health to talk about it in the context of what is going on in your environment and how can we support you in developing skills to cope, regulate, and manage given that environment. What resources do we have about how we can help you get out of that environment? And what does it mean for you to understand what your triggers are so that you can be proactive about your responses and behaviors when it comes to those things, right? We need to understand that when somebody is responding abnormally to an abnormal situation, that then makes them quite normal, right? And stop trying to make them the bad guy for doing the best they can with what they have in a situation that they didn't create. And that is absolutely terrible, inhumane, and subpar, regardless of your race, right? And so when I think about that video, when I think about my work, when I think about the conversation about mental health in the Black community as a whole, it's hard for me not to zoom out and think about all of the environmental, socio-political, and historical factors that are contributing to our capacity as Black people to live well. The cornerstone of the work that I do is centered on self-care, and not like the frilly, take the bubble bath, go on the vacation, drink the champagne self-care, because that's cute and it has its place. But I'm talking about as a radical sense of survival. Because as I mentioned earlier, we live in heightened stress constantly, just by the color of our skin and by the fact that we don't know how I might be perceived when I walk into a given room, right? Or walk down a given street. And so because I live in this heightened sense of stress and all the things that I mentioned earlier about what that does to our immune system and how that makes us susceptible to all these other conditions, right? That we like to blame on, it just runs in our family, or it's, you know, we're more susceptible because we are people of color, or we even like to sometimes blame it on our diets. What I know to be true is that if we can cut out all the things, all the sugars, all the fats, all the animal products, all the things, I still live in this world as a Black woman. And the stresses that come with that do not go away because I ate salad. So we need to be able to acknowledge where we can do something ourselves and be accountable to our own choices and behaviors. And we need to also be cognizant of what is happening around us that does not belong to us, but that we get to be amplifying our voices about creating change in those areas, and recognize how they all play a part in our capacity to be well. When we talk about mental illness, I don't like to call it a mental illness, because again, that implies that it is inherently belongs to the individual. You are ill, you have an illness, right? I like to talk about it as what has been the disruption to your capacity to be mentally well? What has been the thing that has made it difficult for you to feel stable, to feel grounded, to feel at peace, to feel whole? What has been the thing? What has been the story you've told yourself about the experiences that you've survived and lived through? What has happened in your environment? What kind of family did you grow up in? What kinds of things have you witnessed that have disrupted, interrupted, impeded your capacity to live well and whole? And how can we begin to create structures around you, but also skills within you, develop insight that will help you be cognizant of those disruptions, and then support you in being able to navigate and manage them. That way we begin to talk about this conversation from a holistic perspective, and not begin to, when you already are struggling with signs of depression or anxiety or trauma and all the things that already make it difficult, and then also make it your fault on top of that. Like, that's wild to me. So the work that I do with the California Black Women's Health Project is largely centered on understanding yourself, the world, yourself in the world, and how the things that you believe and the ways that you behave are a reflection of and response to things that you've experienced, things that are happening in the world around you. And what does that mean about how you choose to show up and how you get to push back against the things that are challenging your capacity to live well and whole in the world?
What things have you seen as far as positive shifts in our community when it's concerned with mental health?
Yeah, I've seen a beautiful willingness to lean into the conversation about mental health and the struggles that we face collectively. Um, I love that we are being curious now and asking questions as opposed to passing judgments. I think that the work that I do is centered on curiosity always. I'm always wanting to know more about the situation because again, recognizing that everything that we're dealing with is a reflection of or in response to a larger context. So the more we have information about what is going on there, the more we can begin to address it in a way that is going to be long term, much more impactful. So I love that we are having the conversations, that we are being more curious, that we are open to the idea of seeking professional support and treatment, and that we are finding ourselves not feeling as shameful as once upon a time we did about admitting that things are hard and loads are heavy and we need help. And that doesn't make us inherently inadequate or inferior, but that it means we are human. And for a long time, we were denied that humanity.
What would you say to someone who wants to offer support but just doesn't know where to start? Are there general resources that you could point to, or more specific per the community?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, for those of you who are local, I work with the California Black Women's Health Project. We are specifically and solely the only organization that is dedicated to the health and wellness of California's, Black women and girls. And so we have access to resources. We are a resource. We have, you know, lists of people that you can go to directly for treatment and support. And we cover everything from mental health to intimate partner violence to maternal mental health to AIDS and HIV. The gamut when it comes to health, right? It's the California Black Women's Health Project, and we're going across the board: physical health, mental health, and spiritual health. And so of course I also saw someone drop in the chat the link to Therapy for Black Girls. You can go there if you're looking for a clinician to support you. They have a directory. You just enter sort of where you're from and what city you're in, and you can find support there. If someone is coming to you and you simply do not know what to do, the first thing that I think is the most powerful thing we can do is listen. Right? I know, especially as Black women, we have a tendency to want to fix and heal and have the answers and do it all. Sometimes listening, so much of the healing process, and I say this as a therapist, occurs when someone simply feels seen, heard, and understood. Before we introduce any interventions or treatments or anything, just being seen and heard and say, I hear you and your struggles are valid. And I can understand that that may be difficult and you are not wrong or bad for feeling this way. And your tears and your stories are safe with me. I'm not judging you. Like, even just that, you would be surprised how powerful that is. Right. And then beyond that, if you do feel like, you know what, I think that perhaps you could benefit from treatment, then Google, right? Like we Google everything else. You can literally Google, but Therapy for Black Girls. There's Therapy for Black Men is also a resource for the fellas in the room. There's Health in Her Hue. There's celebrities are now popping up with their mental health resource. I know Taraji P. Henson has something. Um, I know that Charlemagne the God has something. Like there's so many, celebrities and people with platforms who are now launching their foundations and organizations around mental health specifically. People are dropping links in the chat right now. So if you need a resource, like get in this chat and get your life, because they are really giving it out here. I am happy to be a resource and point you in a direction of any type of support. And so I can put my website in this chat here. But I would say be mindful of, if somebody's coming to you for support, be mindful of not stepping outside of your scope of expertise. Listen, be there, non-judgmental, and then offer to keep showing up. Hey, can I bring you some lunch today? I know you've been struggling. It's been hard for you to get out of bed. Can I just bring you some lunch? Do you need me to come over and watch the kid for a couple of hours? Maybe I can come by and do your dishes and give you a break, right? Like simple, small things for people who just don't have the capacity to do the day-to-day stuff sometimes. Showing up in those ways is incredibly powerful. And then directing
being there.
professional resources.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Joi. And as I said with Yusuf, we're not done with Joi yet. Later in the program, you're going to have the opportunity to get even deeper and dive deeper with her in our breakout rooms. But I want to bring our very own Gary Williams onto the floor here and talk to Gary about his own personal experience dealing with mental health. So how are you doing this evening, Gary?
I'm doing good.
Good. So can you share with our audience your own personal experience with mental health?
So I struggle with bipolar and severe anxiety. I really didn't know that I had a mental health issue or a diagnosis until a couple years ago. As a child, I was always troubled. I grew up in foster care and juvenile hall most of my life, and we had a very traumatic environment in the home. It was a broken home, raised by a single mother, 5 kids, father not around. Most of my mentors, why I say that is because back then, that's how I looked up to them as role models. They were, gangbangers, stuff like that. And it ultimately led me to, lead a life of violence and criminal activity, so I could relate to, the video we watched where he said his anger spurred and, he was expelled and went to jail. That's exactly what happened to me. I had uncontrollable anger. I didn't know where it was coming from. In the Black family, they don't believe in mental health. So when I did get counseling, stuff like that, they'll label and judge me. So I stopped going. I stopped taking the pills, stuff like that. And I just, I went to the streets. I always ran away. I was never home. And that's why I ended up in foster care and juvenile hall. And then, 18 years old, I still was going through stuff. And I should have never came back home after I came home from placement, but I came back to the same environment where my cousins was after I just, was in a good environment, working at 17 years old for a grocery store, stuff like that. But I went back home with my mom and my cousins was there. And then 9 months after I came home, I caught 2 strikes for being a driver of a car because my cousin and one of my friends went in and robbed the store. And I just been moving through life trying to understand what's wrong, because people tell me that I'm crazy, I'm this, I'm that, but I don't feel that I'm crazy. I feel that I'm very aware of myself. And now that, I identify with the bipolar, I understand that I'm self-aware of, and I take accountability. And what I mean by that is, experiencing my uncle hanging himself on my birthday, all the stuff my mom and my aunts went through, being beat by other men, I ultimately thought it was okay, until I started getting help to see that it's not okay to do stuff like that. And I was scared to take prescription pills, but I started taking pills. And like he said, it gets rid of, the crazy thoughts that you think, the suicidal thoughts, stuff like that. And as I'm still growing, and I don't say going through it, I say growing through it. I try to now take the holistic approach. I'm becoming a yoga teacher. I'm trying to do meditation. I'm trying to do stuff like that, but it's still the environment that I'm in. Even though I just got a certificate of rehabilitation and I'm going for the pardon, I'm always in fear. I'm always in fear that the cops are going to arrest me. Something bad's going to happen because of the environment you know, I live in, and I'm still around the same people, and they don't see the change that I have made. So they still look at me as the same Gary. And, you know, like when Joy was talking, she was saying a lot of stuff about what's going on now in the environment. And that's why I believe that a lot of us can't move forward, you know what I'm saying? Because we're still in that toxic environment. And then when we try to escape it, you know, something always pulls us back, whether it's family, kids, a job, you know. And I feel that what's holding me back is I'm scared. And what I mean by that is I've always been around my mother since I was a child. And I feel that I'm scared to leave the nest because, you know, the world is crazy, especially for somebody who is a person of color and who had a criminal background. I don't have one right now, you know. And I feel as a Black man, we can't really talk about this. You know, I was always angry. I was always violent, you know. But now that I express myself and I understand that the man is both feminine and masculine, you know, I try to show love. And I think that's what ultimately is affecting me because, you know, I try to act like nothing's wrong, you know, brush everything off, nonchalant. But I feel more because I'm not using the drugs. I'm not drinking, you know, all the feelings are there, you know, and I think it's harder for me because as a Black male, you know, you just want to talk to people, but they always tell you got to be strong. You know, we all go through it. Like the person in the comment said, it's all in my head. You know, I'll get through it. But it's not. If I don't talk and find a solution to the problem, I'm not going to be able to get through it. And you know, seeing the therapist and the psychologist it's not funny, but you know, I go to Kaiser and it's like I'm educating them. So it's like I stopped going because it's like there's no really information that they could give me to help me because as soon as I'm done within the hour, I still feel the same feelings, you know, so I have to find different outlets. And what I mean is, you know, I started riding a bike. I go to the beach, stuff like that. And it's all different for me because I'm raised by gang members, you know, people watching people get killed, stuff like that. So now that I'm trying to do this, it's like I'm torn because it's like something wants to pull me back to the old me, but I'm trying to live this new life, but I can't because I'm still, you know, maybe it's still the same environment and maybe I'm scared. And what's scary is because I was this violent person, this angry person. And now that I'm trying to, um, you know, show compassion, love, and kindness, it's hard because, you know, they're like, is he gay? You know, like, what's wrong with him? You know what I'm saying? Oh, he's weird. All because instead of, you know, going to violence, I'm trying to talk about the situation. And what I mean by that is, like, if I see another Black man and, you know, he's angry and we get into altercation, I don't want to fight you. You know, I'm trying to, you know, see where this is stemming from, trying to talk to you. But as I do that, it seems like, you know, the more I do that in my community, the more that I get the pushback because they don't understand about Black mental health or mental health in general. You know, they think it's okay to, you know, walk around angry. And I feel that in the Black community, you know, a lot of Black men they are angry because we don't know how to express ourselves emotionally until we get the proper help. And then when we do get the proper help, you have people like me who is trying to advocate and, you know, show people different techniques and coping skills. And it's like, you know, we're looked down upon because maybe I'm not out there sagging my pants or gang banging like them and stuff like that. So I'm looked at as, you know, the enemy. So it's like hard for me to move forward and try to be this person that I am, knowing that this world it's an evil world, you know, and it's here to tear you down. You know, you just got to stay strong. And suffering from depression, you know, I understand sometimes I don't want to get out of bed, but I have to keep pushing myself because I want to live, you know, I don't want to die. But it's hard when you have all these racing thoughts. You don't have nobody to really talk to. Nobody really knows like what's going on unless you know, tell them. But everybody has a solution to the problem. It's like she said, you know, sometimes we just need somebody to listen and to support us, but everybody wants to go right into fixing the problem. And as a Black male and a Black man in America, you know, it's very hard, you know, especially when all you knew was criminal activity. And, you know, it's scary for me, you know, doing all the stuff that I'm doing, you know, being on this call, you know, joining AFRAM, joining healthcare justice. This is like, you know, I love it, but at the same time, it's like, what am I doing? Am I supposed to be here? You know, I'm always thinking like, do I fit in? You know, it's like, I come from a different background, you know, so it's like, are these people judging me? Like, what do they think about me? You know, so I feel that advocating and just basically showing people this is mental health. You know, I took the mask off. You know, I want people to know the real me, and the real me is just, you know, I was violent, I was angry, I did do a lot of stuff. You know, but as we get older, we understand that mine, I feel that it was childhood trauma. You know, watching all the stuff going on in my home. You know, when my uncle killed himself, I was only 9. That was very traumatic for me, you know, going in the garage, finding him hanging and having to cut him down, stuff like that. After that, that's what, you know, led me to the streets, because he was a role model, you know. He paid me to do chores, stuff like this. You know, he, even with, no, he wasn't my real uncle, he was with my aunt. I felt like a disconnection. And I also felt the disconnection when my sister's father got killed. You know, he was like a father figure to me. He was going to the NFL, and then, you know, somebody took his life. So when I look back at it, you know, going through all this, as a father of 2 boys, trying to do what I'm doing, I'm getting a lot of backlash, you know, and in the Black family, they don't really believe in mental health. So as I am aware of what happened when I was going through life, I'm trying to fix it so my kids don't have to go through it. But it seems like, you know, they want them to go through it because they feel that that's the only way that's going to teach them how to be men. Because what I'm doing is considered, you know, like they tell my kids, oh, you know, he's gay, he's this. It's just, I'm not gay. It's just, I don't want to be angry all the time. I don't want to fight. I don't want to argue. You know, I don't want to do any of that. I just want to see, like, you know, I want to get into your head to see, like, what is this really coming from? Like, why are you really mad? You know, but we can't really do that because we are labeled and we are stigmatized. And it's like, how can we move forward as not just a Black male, as Black people, to understand that, you know what I'm saying, everybody is going through something. And it's just, you have people like me and Joi who is talking about it, who wants to help and change and bring change to the community and bring more awareness for it. There is more people to talk about it, because this doesn't just happen with mental health. This stems, like they said, from everything that happened. But at the same time, you have domestic violence going on. You have this going on. And it's all because as we don't talk, we don't know how to properly express ourselves. So now we're verbally abusing each other, physically abusing each other, you know, and then the kids are seeing this, because this is what I'm going through right now, you know, with my kids. You know, the mother is Black, I'm Black, but at the same time, you know, you have her boyfriend who is physically and verbally abusing my kids, you know, and it's like the mother is allowing this. And I think it's because she was brought up the same way. And what I mean is, now that I try to talk to her and educate her, it's like, no, everything I'm doing is wrong, right? But it's like, as a Black man, it's like, I need to basically get in there to be able to mold them, because they're only 7 and 9. And if I don't, like they said, by the time they're 12 and 13, now they're going to be angry and they're going to be going through everything that I went through. And I'm not going to be able to have any control, because they're not going to know how to properly express themselves. So at the same time, it's happening right in the home, you know, and if we don't get a grip or a hold of it, then this is why our children, and mostly Black males, are going to the streets, you know what I'm saying, or end up dead by getting killed by the police. Is because it comes from proper parenting, you know, and a lot of kids are raised by single mothers, you know, the father's not there. So if we could implement, you know, more of us being role models to these children and stuff like that, I think that would help a lot. But at the same time, you know, a lot of people don't want people to come in their home to talk to their kids. They don't want them to see a therapist, a counselor, you know, because certain stuff might be said, they might get in trouble, this, and that. But we have to just help other people understand that it's not, we're trying to get you in trouble. We're trying to get everybody to be able to talk about this, because it creates something inside internally to where the kids eventually, you know, go to school. they bully other people, they fight, every day, or like
it's a you know a self-feeding circle. And I want to point something out, Gary, because you talked about the stigmatism and feeling like you're other. And I saw Joy put in there, imposter syndrome is real. But I really want to point out to you, when you get a chance, the amount of love that is flowing in this chat for you right now, the open arms in this chat for you, letting you know that they're so happy that you shared your story, that they're so happy that you're stepping up, because you're doing the first step, telling your story, right? Getting rid of that stigmatism, because it's almost a double-edged sword. Joy talked about the constant trauma, but at the same time, you pointed out that not only the stigmatism of mental health in our community, but also that strong Black man. If I'm not angry, if I'm not outwardly violent, then I'm soft. There's something wrong with me, right? So you can't win either way. Let me ask you this, Gary. What would you like to see a change in our community when it comes to approaching mental health for us?
I would like to see more Black therapists, more Black resources, more community organizations, us getting more together, not annually, maybe weekly, monthly, to talk about this, to see if we could get to the bottom. We're not going to get to the bottom, but see if we could come to a solution, just for the people that want to come together in the community. I feel that if I had a therapist who looked like me, I would be able to relate to them more, because they understand where we come from, the culture, how we're raised, some of them even been through some of the stuff that I've been through, and they could relate to me more. What I mean is I'm not trying to say I don't want to see a white therapist, but if you never seen nobody get shot and held them in your arms, how can you relate to me when this is what the pain that I really feel? How can you identify with what I identify with if all you see is the stuff on TV, when we actually are right there next to the stuff happening, and it's happening to us,
Well, Gary, you're the start. You're the start of that change. You're the start of that turnaround, just by talking to us and sharing your life and letting us know what you want to see as someone that's dealt with mental health issues. Now, I want to let everybody know we still have those breakout rooms. So I want to make sure those of you that want to still talk a little bit more with Joy and Gary, but also those that want to show Gary some love, make sure you join that breakout room at the end, because I think Gary needs to know how many people here are here to support him and let him know that there's nothing wrong with him. He is not other. He has a family that's got his back. So,
Georgette, Joy has her hand up. She just wants to make a quick statement before we
sure.
transition.
Mhm. Go ahead, Joy.
I want to share, first of all, Gary, thank you so much for your vulnerability, your openness, your sharing. Something that keeps coming up as we speak about the trauma that we live through as Black people current day, also historically, that has been passed down to us and that we have inherited. We often speak about our resilience and our strength and our capacity to keep going in the face of and in the midst of these things. One thing that's important for me to say, and that I think is important for all of us to hear, is that what has also been passed down to us is our joy. And it is with that joy that we have also survived. And it is so important for us to remember to also tap into that, and to not always or only lean on our resilience because we have to be resilient. We don't choose to be resilient. We have to be resilient. And so it's important for us to also remember that we have the option to access and tap into and lead with our joy as well, our spiritual, divine, intuitive gift of deep, deep joy. And I wanted to say that in the whole group before people begin to go to the breakouts and all of that, because I think it's a reminder that we don't hear often enough. We are told constantly that we get to be strong. We also get to be happy. And that can carry us as well. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful sentiment for us to end that section on. Thank you so much for that, Joy from Joy.